Hey everyone, Desi's here with another video, and today I am in Pal World. Completely different game from the usual. This one is an open world survival game if you're not familiar with it, where you can kind of tame Pokemon-like creatures around the world to basically become your slave and do menial tasks for you like farming and grazing and mining and lumber, and it's a very interesting game that has kind of brought up some thoughts that I would like to discuss in this video. And apart from putting these creatures to work after kind of taking away their will, you can also build as well. You can build cool houses. So I've been kind of experimenting with some of my architectural desires, and I think I've created a pretty cozy home. I got a piano, got a fireplace, even got a nice bookshelf going on. It's kind of starting to read the classics. I've been kind of thinking lately as I've been playing this game just about MMOs and survival games and kind of what they have in common with each other and some of the differences and why we choose to play these games to begin with. What is it that compels us to go into these worlds and leave a bit of a virtual mark and be productive in a way of achieving some sort of objective metric of material gain, even if it's all pixelated? And so, kind of to begin, I would like to first talk about the MMO structure, since that is what I primarily consume when it comes to video games. So, with an MMO, it is an open world. You start with nothing, and you work with other real-life players to accomplish tasks by overcoming the environment of the game via like NPCs and quests and just the system and UI of the game to begin with. That in and of itself is a bit of a challenge, especially for a game like EverQuest, where a lot of those mechanics are pretty outdated. And I think what brings us coming back to those games, what keeps us coming back, rather, is that sense of camaraderie with other players, as well as just the simple dopaminergic pleasures and feedback responses that we get when we achieve something, and how we can kind of gauge a specific milestone ahead of us to work towards. And it seems pretty structured in what we can accomplish and how much time it will require to accomplish those things, even if it takes a really long time. And I think a really good example of that is the epic weapons in EverQuest. I think those quests are extremely long, extremely tedious. They require traveling around the world, waiting on random loot drops that may not and probably will not drop for quite a long time, whether it's because of a low drop chance or super high respawn timers. But when we're working on those quests, we know exactly what we need to do, and we know exactly what the outcome will be once we finish that quest. And I think as a human, that is extremely comfortable, or comforting rather. It is just a nice thing to know that you are putting time into something that you know at the end of the day you will get closer to getting exactly what you want by the end of that quest. And I think for me at least, completing epic quests has been kind of my highlight in EverQuest in terms of a gameplay mechanic. And whenever I log into a character that has achieved one of the epic weapons, whether it's the 1.0 or the 1.5 or 2.0, I go into my inventory and I see that weapon, and I can attribute all of those memories and all the time it took to earn that weapon, and just admire the design of the weapon. And it definitely feels like some sort of status item as well, so there's some sort of maybe personal satisfaction that can exert itself socially. And I think that is why I really enjoy that aspect of the game. But aside from that, kind of moving on to survival games, which I'm currently inhabiting right now, it is a very similar structure. You start with nothing, and you are kind of sprinkled with these small achievements and small milestones that kind of get you going in the world, and it kind of allows you to really gauge that progress precisely. And I think even more so than an MMO, because you can have a direct effect on the world in front of you in terms of building something or tearing down trees or mining stone at the top of a mountain. I'll take you on a little journey real quick. There's a little iron ore spot I found, and I marked it on my map here. But it's something that I really love about survival games, and most notably in Ark Survival Evolved. It's that dinosaur game where there are specific landmarks throughout the map, because this is not a procedurally generated map. It is static, and it is the same for everyone, I believe. And so when you're playing on a static world, you can kind of find certain milestones or certain landmarks. And this is one I found at the top of this mountain. Whee! There's a giant area. I'll get to it real quick before I reveal it. There is a giant little ore spot. Just a whole sprinkled array of stone ores, or like iron ores, that I need for a lot of the recipes that I'm trying to craft. And it's little things like these where it kind of creates a sense of intimacy with the world, and how you can kind of get yourself a bit more acquainted with these little areas, and it makes it nice when you come back to it again, because you know it's there and you know you discovered it. And that, I think, is very similar to MMOs in that sense of discovery, where you find a certain camp spot, or you go to a zone you've never been in before, and you find a certain NPC, and it drops this piece of loot that was a huge upgrade, and now you know in your repertoire of this game and your knowledge of it that it's expanded, and you become more acclimated. And I think that creates a really, really deep sense of immersion when it comes to gaming, and on a simple level of being a human. And I think the third overarching topic that I want to discuss in this video, besides just are survival games and MMOs interlinked, or like, are they that different from each other? Are they really similar? Is the real life implications living in modern day society, living in modern day, especially Western dominated narratives, and how we view ourselves and each other, and what we want out of life, what keeps us getting out of bed, what keeps us trying to learn new things and participate in different avenues of life. And I think video games counts as a big part of that, because it's a really good platform in our reality where we can participate and experiment with ourselves and our psyche and our personal narratives without directly having to face the consequences of scarcity. And that's what I kind of talked about in my previous video related to Minecraft, where you can tap into more of your creative side and kind of build to your heart's content and express yourself without any limitation. And video games really allows us to explore those areas in our mind. And I think survival games is a perfect representation of that ability. But I also think it feeds into those same mechanics fundamentally that MMOs do, which is direct feedback and progress. And I think progress is something that we have been so ingrained to want to pursue when we are awake and conscious out of bed. I think, growing up, we're going to school, we have a job, we need to make money, we need to kind of fulfill these needs that need to be met. But on top of that, it is like a status thing as well that can subconsciously affect the amount of things that we want to achieve in this world. And I think there's a lot I could go into about that, or like why we feel that to begin with. I think a lot of it stems from conditioning and insecurity as well, I think, and just kind of wanting to be validated and wanting to feel like we are worthy or that we have done something of value in our finite life. And I think these kind of games really tap into that mental desire because if you just look at this menu alone, look how linear it is in terms of the 1, 2, 3 mechanic of levels and how the progress of these items slowly over time ramps up to become a little bit more advanced until you get to the bottom where it's like all futuristic and plasma rifles and just all of these kind of insane sci-fi components that you would inevitably in our kind of mythologizing of science fiction, you would see that from the caveman times up until like Star Wars. And so it gives you a very specific sort of timeline to see how you can progress within. And I think for me at least, kind of playing this game, it is very satisfying because I can see exactly what I'm working towards. And it gives me a comfort in playing, and it gives me a satisfaction as well. And I get that same sort of like dopaminergic buzz when I play EverQuest or World of Warcraft. And recently I've kind of re-quit World of Warcraft because I think that game is a bit, or I would say a lot more insidious in its design than EverQuest is. Because World of Warcraft is super accessible and it has, I feel like, a little bit more manipulation in the systems where it's kind of intending to be more addictive. Whereas, at least in classic EverQuest, those systems seem to be built more out of a sense of being true to the world itself rather than trying to get people to become addicted to this game. And for Pal World, it's, I would say, sort of a hybrid between the compulsivity of World of Warcraft and the kind of realized but very satisfying experience of playing classic EverQuest. Because Pal World is still a single player game. There is co-op mechanics. I was playing with some buddies the other day where we started this world. So it still has those abilities to work and play with others. But it is still a completely solo-friendly experience. And so it kind of rids you of that subconscious feeling of FOMO, and that if I'm not playing right now, I'm missing out and I'm like not ahead, or I'm not sort of caught up with other players that may have been doing raids that I've missed, or maybe I'm locked out of content now because I didn't get flagged, and so now if I log in, I won't be able to experience the same thing that everyone else is. And that is one thing I'm not 100% looking forward to in Planes of Power, because I do want to experience that expansion, but I also know that if I really want to participate in Planes of Power, I'm going to have to spend a lot of time kind of trying to get flagged for certain zones, and that's why I'm also looking forward to EverQuest Legends 2, is it kind of takes away that FOMO. But it definitely feels more psychologically light to play these kind of games, these kind of open world survival-esque games, because it feels very similar to an MMO, but it's kind of vacant of that sense of FOMO and that sense of being manipulated to pay month by month for a live service game. This is a one-time purchase, and so you can kind of go into it. You kind of see the end experience. You see what the final pieces of content, at least on an equipment level, are until they add new updates. Oh, you can get wings. That's cool. That's something interesting to look forward to. And so I think that is a really big difference between MMOs and open world solo friendly survival games, is that absence of FOMO. And I think, I know, like, building is definitely a big one too. That is kind of a unique trademark of survival games. But I think on their own, MMOs and survival games are very similar, especially if you compare it to classic EverQuest, where If you die, you have to go back to your corpse, which is a lot of survival games like this one do. You have to have food and water on you. That's something that Classic EverQuest really relies on, is that you have to kind of be equipped and prepare for long expeditions. If you're a ranger, you should have arrows on you, and every character should have food and water. Resource management is really important in Classic EverQuest with your health and mana and even endurance. And in survival games, that's very similar. There's kind of like a stamina bar, there's health. There's some other systems too in this game, like temperature, which isn't in EverQuest. But on their own, they have very similar mechanics. And so I think it's just interesting to kind of talk about those differences and maybe investigate, like, okay, like, why am I playing a survival game over an MMO right now? And without getting too deep into it, it's just something new. It's something different. It's a new world to explore. There's new equipment to discover. There's new pals to enslave and become your workers. That was another thing I wanted to touch on in this video, is like how this game, a big foundation of it is finding these creatures throughout the world, like literally like beating them up and then taking them with like a Pokemon ball, and they become your workers. And I think on its own, like, it's sort of meant to be comedic in a way. It's kind of the trademark of this survival game, at least, and Ark Survival Evolved too, except they don't really work for you in that game. They're just kind of utilitarian creatures that you can bring with you to like carry items, or yeah, you kind of have to ride them in order to kind of utilize them for their own intended purposes, where all the creatures in this game are just doing stuff automatically. And maybe without going too far into it, because I know I can get a little out there sometimes, and maybe not, maybe just kind of pretentious. I don't know, but like our own desire for control, maybe, and like domination in a sense, and maybe like managing others, and maybe that has to do with just growing up under capitalism and trying to create efficient economic systems, at least like living within a seeming system that has a cohesive economic structure. And like playing these games, you can kind of experience a little bit of like management, I suppose, and like understanding how different creatures can have how different people can have different abilities and strengths that can kind of all come together to build a cohesive like market in some way. Although none of these creatures are getting paid, they're only getting fed. They only have a bed, so I would say they're pretty much slaves. And I think that, you know, I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't want to like view myself as some sort of like slave owner or anything. It's all virtual, and I hope these pals, they all have like seeming smiles on their faces. So I want to try to be as ethical as possible when I'm playing this game. But yeah, I think that's kind of like an interesting aspect that makes this game a little different from the others, and it just makes me a little curious about why this is fun in a certain way, or maybe it's just like it's just a part of your brain that likes efficiency. And I was kind of joking with my friend yesterday about like this being like Henry Ford's dream game of just, I think eventually there's like conveyor belts and just like you're literally creating a factory of obedient workers that are just manufacturing and producing materials that you need to craft better things. And yeah, I think that's interesting. MMOs don't really do that, so that's a big difference, I suppose, is you don't really have like NPCs working for you in like MMOs like EverQuest or World of Warcraft. I don't want to think about like the garrison system in Warlords of Draenor, or like the work tables or whatever where you can like send people out. Like I've kind of blocked that part out of World of Warcraft in my mind, besides bringing it up right now. But yeah, I just guess I wanted to stop by and talk about this. Like my other videos, some of these rambly thoughts pop up in my head, and I feel like I just need to get it off my chest. So I hope if you're still watching this that you that you enjoyed it at least in some way, or maybe were morbidly curious at these ideas. But if you did enjoy the video, feel free to leave a like. If you didn't, feel free to leave a dislike. And if you want to watch more videos like this, or listen to more videos like this, I would say, feel free to subscribe for more videos. Anyways, let me do a little wave emote and say hey. Have a great day. Peace. Huge shout out to the members of the channel. Thank you so much for supporting. I really appreciate it. We got Kirk W. Cowgill, Cluck Quests, Slayheim, Miss Metal 324, and Rowing Boats 8410. Thank you again for supporting the channel. Really means a lot to me. Have a great day. Peace.